Hi, I'm Greg Hunter, and this is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, the 13th, 2012. The big story that you're not really seeing covered in the news is the meeting this weekend in Istanbul, Turkey, about Iran's nuclear program. And now, of course, Iran is there, the U.S., Great Britain, France, Germany, and China, and Russia. And this comes down to really an attempt to avoid World War III. On one side, you have the U.S. and its allies. On the other side, you have Iran and China and Russia, its allies. And I find it hard to believe, after, more than a decade of working on a nuclear program, Iran's going to say, oh, you want us to stop? Sure, no problem. Meanwhile, sanctions from the West against Iran, financial system, its financial system, banking, and its oil have been ratcheting up. And Iran has been retaliating by cutting off oil to European countries. This is an ugly, ugly mess, and I hope it is resolved peacefully. But I think this goes sour. This is a prelude to war. Next up, Syria, another Middle East hotspot. You know, they've had an uprising there for the last about year, and more than 9,000 people have been killed. Russia has given warnings to the West not to arm the rebels. And at least for the time being, there's been a ceasefire. But experts say that probably will not last. The rebels do not trust Bashar al-Assad. Next up, North Korea. They have reportedly launched another ballistic missile, but it has failed shortly after liftoff. This is one part of the axis of evil. Even though they don't have enough money to feed their people, they have enough to build ballistic missiles, or at least attempt to build ballistic missiles. It will not be their last attempt. This part of the axis of evil is alive and well. Rick Santorum is out of the GOP presidential race. I'm surprised by that, aren't you? I thought he was in it to win it. I thought he had the best chance to, really counter Romney in terms of the delegates. But he's surprisingly gone. That leaves Newt Gingrich, who doesn't have a lot of money, and Dr. Ron Paul, who does have enough money to stay in the race until the convention. That's what he says. And also that leaves Mitt Romney, the front runner. I think it would be very interesting to see it come down to Paul and Romney in a few of these primaries. I would love to see how that worked out. The European debt crisis, which I think is misnamed, it should be called the European banking solvency crisis, is bad and getting worse. The IMF chief, Christine Lagarde, is in the U.S. with hat in hand for another $400 billion. In an election year like this, with budget problems in the U.S., I think it's doubtful she gets it. Although you never can tell what the Federal Reserve will do. They pumped out $16 trillion during the last crisis, but this is even worse. This has a total of something like $46 trillion, and it may be way too big for the Fed to really deal with. It's certainly the biggest crisis the Fed has ever had to deal with, and it likely will have to deal with it. So an analyst by the name of Graham Summers says he thinks that that the world powers are between a rock and a hard place. If they start printing money, pow, $7 a gas here in the U.S., here we come. If they don't print money, boom, it implodes. And he thinks the European Union and the European debt situation implodes, crashes by June of this year. If that happens, the crater from that is going to be enormous. It will certainly be big enough to suck down the United States economy and the rest of the world economy. The European Union is the single biggest financial bloc, trading bloc market in the world. Is there any wonder why gold is rising this week? It's got no place else to go. Some people, analysts, think it'll go to $2,000 an ounce. Let me tell you, if Europe implodes, that estimate is going to seem a little weak. Finally, I want to talk about the Buffett rule. Warren Buffett with the Buffett rule. Millionaires ought to be taxed. What a farce this is. That just deflects what I think is the real problem with the country, and that is all the bailouts, of which Mr. Buffett has, in his Berkshire Hathaway fund, have gotten a lot out of the bailouts. Goldman Sachs, which was bailed out through the AIG debacle. Some of the companies he owns. General Electric, government largeness, lots of it there. Wells Fargo, government largeness with that. Bank of America, he invested there. I got a better idea. Instead of the Buffett rule, how about we stop the Buffett bailouts? How about that? I mean, the Buffett rule might raise between, at the most, maybe $200 billion. It's the most relaxed, the most optimistic raising of money will be a couple $100 billion. I've heard really about 30 or 40 billion. Well, $200 billion. The deficit in February alone was $229 billion. Stop the Buffett bailouts. Forget the Buffett rule. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for supporting USAWatchdog.com.